Hi, friends. Welcome to Beautifully Bookish Bethany. I recently did my 2024 mid-year book freakout tag, and in the comments of that video, somebody suggested I should go back and do a retrospective of all the books that I said were my anticipated releases for the second part of the year and see which of those I actually ended up reading. And I thought, that is a great idea. So I went back and made a playlist of all of my mid-year book freakout tags, and I have been doing them since 2018. I joined mid-year in 2017, so I've been doing this the whole time I've been on BookTube, and it is kind of wild to look at the thumbnails all the way back. So I thought it would be fun to look together at all of the books that I said I was excited about and see which of them I read, what did I think of them, and also we're going to take a look back at me several years younger. So you will see things moving through time. Enjoy. I'm going to pull up the playlist and let's take a look. All right, here we go. 2018. Oh my God.
Anticipated release for the rest of the year. Again, I could say a lot of things for this. Let me know in the comments down below if you guys would be interested in seeing me make an entire video about some of my most anticipated new releases for the rest of the year, but I'm going to go with two.
So I'm going to pause real quick and just say a couple of things. My background has changed so much, my filming background, since I started. Obviously, it's unusual right now because I'm traveling. This is not my normal background. But also, oh my God, I look so young. Wow, 2018. So this was 6 years ago. I feel like I look so young. But I was like, I'm in my late 30s now. I was in my early 30s. It's so wild. Okay, let's look at the books though.
Is Pride by E.B. Zaboy. I have not read it yet, but I'm really excited. I've already pre-ordered a finished copy. This one comes out in September, and it is a remix of Pride and Prejudice set in modern day Brooklyn, and it deals with like race and yeah, and it's so pretty. Anyway, so I'm really excited about this one.
I feel like I talked about that very awkwardly, but I have read Pride by E.B. Zaboy. It was great. I really love it. It's a YA Pride and Prejudice retelling that is kind of cool because it's retelling the social commentary elements of Pride and Prejudice. It has the romance piece. I don't think that's the strongest part of the book. And I think the fact that it's not the strongest part of the book is part of why some people didn't love it as much. But I have read this one and I gave it 5 stars.
And then the other one I'm really anticipating is Wildcard by Marie Lu. This is the follow-up to Warcross, which was one of my favorite books of last year. So I'm really looking forward to reading this.
Okay, I have read Wildcard, but some of you might know I read it pretty recently. It took me years to pick this up and I finally did, and it was pretty good. I think part of it was that the reviews that were coming out were just not what I had been hoping for, and so I kept putting it off, but I did eventually read it. I did enjoy it. I didn't love it as much as I did Warcross, but I do think that the fact that both of my anticipated releases for this year were YA titles really speaks to how when I first started BookTube, I was reading predominantly YA. Now I do still read some YA, but it is a much smaller part of my reading. Okay, the other thing that I forgot I wanted to include in here was the question prior to that, which is a new release that I haven't read yet but want to. So let's take a look at what my picks were for 2018.
I mean, there are plenty of them, but let's go with a couple that I had on hand. Lifelike by Jay Kristoff. I've been hearing really good things about this. The beginning of a new sci-fi series, young adult. Do you want to read?
Okay, I did read that and I liked it. I read the second book in the series and it was fine and I never finished it.
And then I also have The Death of Mrs. Westaway by Ruth Ware. So
I also read that. I loved it. I am a fan of Ruth Ware. So for 2018, I have read all 4 of the books that I mentioned as things that I wanted to read and anticipated releases, which is pretty impressive. I feel pretty good about this. All right, let's take a look at those questions for 2019. New release you haven't read yet but want to. Look at me putting in title cards in between questions. I had so much time and energy.
Of course, there are multiples of this, but I thought I would pick out a couple of the ones that I'm most excited to get to.
My background has developed a little bit. We have I loved this actually, this really beautiful kind of tapestry that was Truthwitch inspired. I still have it somewhere. I've got my pin board. It's, taking over more of the walls, looking a little more bookish, but still nowhere near what we end up with later. Okay, so things that I hadn't read yet that I wanted to.
I'm really excited to read We Hunt the Flame by Hafsa Faisal. This is a Middle Eastern inspired debut YA fantasy novel that I've been hearing really, really great things about. I was hoping to listen to this on audiobook, but the audio is a little weird, so I think that's not going to work. So I need to make space for this on my physical TBR.
Okay, so We Hunt the Flame, yes, the audiobook was weird. I don't know what they did with the audiobook on that one. It was terrible, so I couldn't listen to that. I tried to read this physically and it really just wasn't working for me. I ended up DNFing this. It was a few years later though.
What I'm excited to get to, I'm actually hoping to read sometime in the next week, which means that hopefully I will have already read this by the time this video goes up. This is If I'm Being Honest by Emily Wibberley and Austin Siegmund Broca. This has just been calling to me. It sounds so fun. I've heard so many great things about it. It's a YA romantic comedy that is a retelling of Shakespeare's The Taming of the Shrew, and I'm so excited for it.
I have read this. I did read it, I think, if I remember correctly, soon after this video, and it was really good. Again, both of these books are YA. I was still pretty heavily reading YA at the time. And then I read another book by this couple that I didn't love, but I liked this one. Anticipated reads for the rest of the year.
If you guys have seen some of my recent videos talking about the stuff I'm most excited about from BEA and BookCon, you've seen some of these, but I'm going to highlight 2 arcs that I have, and I guess I'll mention one that I don't have, but I'm hoping to maybe get at some point.
BEA and BookCon. Those were the days, although I have heard whispers that it may be coming back in a new form, so stay tuned for that.
I'm really excited for Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. This is her first adult book, and it's just like everything that I want in a book. I'm so excited for it. It's set at Yale and involves witches and secret societies. I'm so here for it.
Clearly, my taste has not changed much. Witches and secret societies. Yes, I have read Ninth House. I loved it. I haven't read Hellbent, the sequel yet, so that is still on my TBR, but I did read this. I even made a whole video that still gets views now that was really fun, where I went with my spouse to visit Yale and did a video tour of all the places in the map in the book. So I'll link that up above if you want to check it out. That was really fun. But I have read this, and that was the hot arc. Everybody was trying to get their hands on it that year.
I'm also really excited for a book that I am currently in the middle of reading. This is a September release called The 10th Girl by Sarah Faring. And so far, it's really, really interesting. This is where I'm at right now. So it's very interesting. This is a debut YA book. It's a gothic thriller set in 1970s Argentina. And it's very good and very interesting. So I'm very curious to see how the rest of the book goes.
Okay, I finished this. I loved it, and that was a very unpopular opinion. This has one of the lowest ratings on Goodreads of anything that I've read, but I was a huge fan of it. I really liked the twist, and it's one of those books where I can't talk about what I love about it without spoiling it, and I don't know that the marketing was ideal for it, but I really, really loved The 10th Girl, but most people hated it. I did finish that one.
And another one that I wanted to mention that I'm very excited for is coming out really soon, I think in July. This one is The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead. He is the author of The Underground Railroad, which is one of my all-time favorite books. I think it's amazing and powerful, and this one is in some ways a follow-up to it. It says it dramatizes another strand of American history through the story of 2 boys sentenced to a hellish reform school in Jim Crow-era Florida. And he writes in a little bit of a fabulous way, but yeah, I loved Underground Railroad. I'm very excited to read Nickel Boys.
I have read Nickel Boys. It was excellent. It wasn't an all-time favorite for me the way that Underground Railroad was, but it was a very good book. So is that it? Yeah, that's it. 2 for 2, y'all. It seems like I was pretty conservative in what books I was anticipating, and it was things that I was going to read pretty quickly for the most part. Wildcard did take me a few years. But so far, I've read all of these, or at least attempted to read all of them. I did have 1 DNF. Okay, let's move on to 2020, the year that COVID began.
Hi, friends. Welcome back. It is a new release that you haven't read yet but want to.
This was an interesting background. I now have a bookshelf next to me. I still have that same bookshelf. You see it behind me. And then I got a desk, which is no longer in this position in my room, but it was. And I was like, well, let's try filming in this little corner. And I didn't love this. I don't feel like I kept the setup for very long, but clearly I had it at this point.
I'm going to give you two answers, one adult and one YA. My YA selection is Song of Wraiths and Ruin by Roseanne A. Brown. And this is on my TBR for July, so I'm hoping I can get to it soon, but I'm definitely very excited about this one. It's a debut YA fantasy that is African inspired, and it has two characters who have reasons to want to assassinate the other person. And I know it's like dark, and it sounds like it's going to be great and right up my alley.
Okay, I have read this. It was really good. I liked it a lot. I never read the sequel. I think part of why this was on my TBR was in 2020, I spearheaded the Social Distance Book Fest, which was this huge socially distanced online book festival. And the panel that I hosted included all of these debut authors, including this author. And so I was like, well, I need to go read all of their books now. The event had been in April. I read it a couple months later. It was a very strong YA debut. I tend to be really bad, though, about going back and finishing series, especially YA, because I feel like by 2020, I was reading less of that than I had been before. Things had started to shift.
The other one that I really want to get to is the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires
by
Brady Hendricks. This is a new release this year that I'm really interested in, and the book is just so pretty, and I've heard so many good things about it. It's kind of a horror comedy. It follows a group of women in the South with a book club who have a new neighbor move in, this man who joins the book club and seems pretty nice and normal, but then there start to be some weird things about him, and obviously they're vampires.
Yes, I have read Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. That ended up being the first book we did. Was it 2020 the first time we did it? That was our Halloween pick for the Blades and Bodice Rippers book club. Oh, I love that. It was really good. So I read it in fall of this year that it came out. I was a big fan of it. I know it's a little controversial, but I thought it was really well done as a horror comedy. And I thought it did a good job of tackling the very difficult issues that it was dealing with, but it did have a lot of content warnings. So I get why it was not everyone's cup of tea. So I've read both of those.
Release for the second half.
All right,
of the
anticipated
year.
Releases. Let's see.
Again, there are lots of them, but I thought I would give you two, one of which I am hoping to read very, very soon. This is Harrow the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. It is the sequel to Gideon the Ninth, and
Of course I've read this. Of course I've read this. I love the Locked Tomb series. I was so excited. It did take me a while to read it, though. I don't think I read it until early 2021. So I had an arc and I did not get to it in a timely manner. But it was great. I did like it. Not my favorite book in the series, but these books are all so brilliant. Also, the glitter on my eyeshadow in this is a lot.
Hark is the main character in this one.
Yes.
It's a book that was very, very polarizing. People kind of loved it or hated it, but I absolutely adored Gideon the Ninth. It was one of my favorite books left.
You know what I notice looking at these videos is that by 2020, I was talking in my normal tone of voice. I don't know if you noticed, but I think the first year or so I was on BookTube, I was talking in this much higher sort of like sweet voice, which is really interesting, kind of like this. And my normal register is lower. And so it's interesting to see how with my increased comfort on camera, that shifted over the years. I don't know if anybody else has noticed that, but I noticed it.
Last year, the humor really worked for me. The characters and the world were cool for me. And so I'm excited to continue on. I am also really looking forward to Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia.
Yes.
I already have a hold for the audiobook from my library, and so as soon as it comes out, I should be getting that downloaded to my phone and listening to it. The cover is absolutely beautiful, and I really like Silvia Moreno Garcia's writing. It tends to work really well for me, and this one is kind of a classic Gothic haunted house story. Definitely ready to read it. I have heard some mixed reviews. People seem to kind of love this or really not like it, but I'm hopeful because her writing usually seems to work pretty well for me.
Yes, I have read that. It was my favorite book of 2020, if I'm not mistaken. I always read Sylvia Moreno Garcia's books not long after they come out, if I don't read them before they come out. And this one, I wasn't able to get my hands on an advance copy, but I read it pretty quickly. I reviewed it and I loved it. It was so good. I love her books. Okay, y'all, listen, I gotta say, I'm pretty impressed. I didn't think I would be just like hitting them all out of the park like this. Let's see if we can keep going. I feel like there's got to be one that I haven't read or attempted, but let's find out. Let's move on to 2021.
Hi friends, welcome to Beautifully Bookish Bethany. Today's video is going to be the mid-year book freakout tag. What is a new release you haven't read yet but want to?
Oh my gosh, look at my hair. It's so long and I love it. Not long after this, I got tired of having long hair and I cut it myself because the salons weren't really open yet. Is that when I did? I think this is when I did that because I hadn't had a haircut in such a long time because of the pandemic and I just chopped it all off. I'm loving my makeup in this. I'm glowing. My hair is looking so good. And my background is getting closer to what it ended up being for a long time. I recently sort of changed it up. And I forgot that I was doing this. This was a period where for a while I would secretly have a book stack behind me that was related to some kind of a video that I was doing as like a little Easter egg. I don't know what video I was working on for this, but there was something. So that's kind of fun. All right, let's see what I said.
I mean, let's be real, there are many, but I am limiting myself to two. So here are two that have recently come on my TBR that I'm really excited to read. The first is Sorrowland by Rivers Solomon. I've now read
this book is so good. Okay.
a couple of things by Rivers Solomon, and they have just such intense, beautiful, thoughtful, thought-provoking writing. And this is gothic horror, which I'm very interested in. It follows a pregnant woman who flees into the woods and there are monsters, and I don't know all of the details, but it just sounds really interesting. The cover is beautiful, and I know Rivers Solomon writes really interesting and beautiful things.
Yes, I read this. I loved it. Oh, so well written. It was harrowing. Absolutely. There were so many layers of nuance to what this was exploring. It was kind of a Southern Gothic horror that was really weird and metaphorical and dealt with religious trauma. There was a lot in this. I gave it 5 stars. It was definitely a hit.
And then for another book with a gorgeous cover that I purchased, this is Son of the Storm by Suyi Davies Okunbowa, and I believe this is his debut novel. It's the first in a new epic fantasy series that has politics and magic and betrayal, and I have heard good things about it, so I really want to read it. So there you go.
I did read Son of the Storm, and I did not like it. That ended up making my worst of the year list for 2021. Oof. Yeah, the writing I found really tedious, and there were some kind of spoilery choices made in this that I did not like. I have a Goodreads review for this with a spoiler section, so if you want to hear my specific thoughts, but no, I had such high hopes for it that it was a no for me.
2 new releases I haven't read yet, but I want to. The next question is, what is your most anticipated release for the second half of the year?
Okay,
this is another question that's really difficult to answer. I'm not sure that these are my top 2, but I'm going to give you a couple that are on my radar that I'm really looking forward to. One is Small Favors by Erin A. Craig. This is a YA horror novel with like small town secrets that looks really interesting. Another is,
I have read it. It was interesting. It was very good. I like Erin A. Craig quite a lot. This was another 5-star read for me. Yeah, it was really good. I love that I'm seeing the years where I'm starting to find my stride dabbling in the horror genre, which ended up becoming something that I've really loved.
Is Velvet Was the Night by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. I'm always excited when she has a new book coming out, and this one I think is another like noir crime book rather than a fantasy, but look at the cover. It's gorgeous. Clearly I'm gonna read it. I love her work. Okay.
Do I just always put Sylvia Moreno Garcia on my most anticipated releases list? Because clearly I've read this. It's not my favorite book from her, but it's still really good because her books are always so good. The like noir historical fiction is not my favorite version of Sylvia Moreno Garcia, just because those are not my favorite subgenres. But she is one of the only people where I would pick up a book like that, and I still did enjoy it. You know what I think it is? I think it's because her books typically come out late summer, early fall. And so whenever I'm putting them together, her book is one of my most anticipated releases. And so it seems like once I started reading her, you just start seeing her stuff on here. And then I always read them.
To give you several answers, basically.
Okay.
I'm also really
I have
excited
one.
for The Inheritance of Orquídea Divina by Zoraida Cordova. This is her first adult.
Okay, I read this. I think I pronounced it wrong though. The Inheritance for Orquídea Divina. This was so good. This was one of my favorite books of the year. Okay, what
Novel under Zoraida Cordova. She's written adult romance, like steamy romance, under a pen name, but this is the first time she's writing like a fictional novel. This one is Latinx inspired. I think it has some historical elements plus magical realism and a lot of family stuff. I don't know a ton about it, but again, gorgeous cover, an author who consistently writes really great books, and I'm excited to see what she does with it.
So yeah, I read this one. I loved it. It made my favorites list for the end of the year. It was a beautiful family saga with magical realism. Also, note that this year, the majority of the books I'm talking about are not YA, because by 2021, I was reading far less of it.
And the last one I'll mention here is Within These Wicked Walls by Lauren Blackwood. So this is a YA debut that is, get this, an Ethiopian-inspired fantasy retelling of Jane Eyre. I mean, I love Jane Eyre. Everything about this looks incredible, so I'm really excited to check it out.
And I have also read that. Within These Wicked Walls was good. It wasn't as amazing as I was hoping it would be, but I think I gave it a 4-star. It was a very solid book. Y'all, we're just like hitting it out of the park year after year. All right, so 2022 is the one year that I did this tag on live with guests. I feel like 2022 was the year that I was doing a lot of big live streams with large panel discussions. I know people really liked them. There are a lot of work though to organize, and I just haven't really had the spoons for doing that in a while, but this should be interesting. So let's see what we said. Next up, new release you haven't read yet, but want to. And okay, so I finally found where we start talking about this, because we're going off on so many tangents. This might take a minute. So we've got a whole lineup here. I'm going to try to just find the ones that I talked about. I went with like 3 that I've bought that I haven't read yet. I mean, there are others I've bought and haven't read yet, but I picked 3. The most recent one to come out was The Final Strife by Sarah El Arifi. I have been hearing so much praise for this. It's a debut queer, like, I think North African inspired fantasy with, I'm excited. I've been hearing great things.
The way that Shauna's been shouting about it.
Oh my God, I know. Also, she follows me on Twitter, so like I clearly needed to buy this. Oh, Twitter, before it was X and had collapsed. Oh my God. I have read The Final Strife. It was very good. I have not read the second book in the series. I think it's a duology, but I did read it and I liked it. And then I also really still want to read Delilah Green Doesn't Care, because I love that cover. I've heard good things. Yay, sapphic romances. I love that we're getting so many of them. I am on the wait list for the audiobook at my library, so I'm going to probably do it that way. And then The Stardust Thief. Okay, so I have read Delilah Green. I've read that entire series. I love Delilah Green. It was great, so definitely lived up to it. And then what by Chelsea Abdullah, which is like a Middle Eastern inspired debut fantasy. I really want to read all 3 of those. So those are okay. So I have read The Stardust Thief. That one was a disappointment for me. It wasn't. It was okay. So I read it, and I think it made my sort of disappointing list for that year. Let's see if I can find where in this video we start talking about anticipated releases, because that could go for a while. There's a few more than this that I've pre-ordered, and then there's, I don't know. These are definitely my top 4. Babel
Fire Off Kwong. I feel like I'm gonna love it. I'm so excited.
I read it. I did not love it. I gave it 4 stars. Like it was, I liked it. I had critiques of it, but I was very, very excited for it.
I think it's gonna be great. The Oleander Sword by Tasha Suri.
Of course. I have read it. I loved it. It was great. This is the second book in the series. And it's funny because this year, the third book in that series is finally coming out. And that was on my list of most anticipated books for 2024.
Love everything by Tasha Suri. Nona the Ninth by Tamsin Muir, because
I've read this because of course I have. I'm caught up on the Locked Tomb series. I love that that's on my list again. Loved it.
I love the Gideon the Ninth series. It is a strong flavor that is not everybody's, but is mine. And House of Hunger by Alexis Henderson. I'm very excited about. Because it's like gothic vampire story, black vampire. I'm so excited because she wrote The Year of the Witching, which I like loved, was my favorite book of the year. Very, very excited. Gorgeous cover. So those are like my top 4.
I have also read that and I did really like it. That one was a little bit more mixed reviews, but I really enjoyed it. It wasn't a perfect book, but it was very good. So again, I don't know that this is the most exciting thing because it would be maybe more interesting to see me say, oh no, I haven't read these books. But I have so far have read all of the books that I said I was most looking forward to, which is pretty good. I would say that probably tells me I've been cautious in which books I add to my list for these videos. And in most cases, they end up being hits. Not always, but generally. All right, let's go on to the final year. This is my 2023 book freakout tag. And that will be it because I just did 2024. So I still have not read any of the books I mentioned there.
Hi friends, welcome to Beautifully Bookish Bethany. In today's video, I'm going to be doing the mid-year book freakout tag.
Okay, so this is like fully a lot of what my background looks like now. I have one other little bookshelf now to the side of me, and which I love. I feel like it's just been, continued to level up over the years. I have my favorites shelf behind me where these are my favorite books of the year. I really enjoy that. All right, so let's go here to most anticipated.
A new release that you haven't read yet, but want to. For this question, I decided to go ahead and look at all the books that I've pre-ordered this year. I've got to say, I'm doing pretty good at getting to my pre-orders. I've been reading the majority of them, although there are some that I haven't read yet. So I want to tell you about 3 books that I was excited enough about to pre-order and really do want to read this year, but haven't read yet.
Okay.
First is Don't Fear the Reaper by Stephen Graham Jones. I'm kind of saving this for October. I
read this past October, but I have read it. I have finished the series.
I feel like that's going to be when I want to pick this up. It's the sequel to My Heart is a Chainsaw, which was one of my favorite horror novels the year it came out. And this one is the follow-up set several years later. So I expect to really like this. I do want to read it, but again, I'm kind of saving it for probably the fall. Then one that...
Okay, so yeah, I did read that. It was great. I ended up reading it in the winter of this year before I read the finale in the series, but I have read that.
I think I might read really soon. I keep wanting to pick it up, and I think this might happen really soon, but The Blood Gift by N.E. Davenport, another book that is a follow-up to one of my favorite books the year that it came out. I absolutely loved The Blood Trials, and this is just a duology, so I really want to finish up the story and read the sequel. And then
I have finished this book. It was great. I thought it was a really excellent ending to the series. It was very satisfying. I didn't love it quite as much as I did the first book, but it was still really good, and I have read it.
Lastly is Mortal Follies by Alexis Hall. This actually just came out, so it hasn't even been in my possession for long, but it is a historical fantasy romance, a queer historical fantasy romance that sounds like everything I need. A young noble woman must pair up with an alleged witch to ward off a curse in this irresistible sapphic romance. Yes?
I have read this and I loved it. This is an unpopular opinion because it is a very specific kind of book. It is highly stylized and it's very different from other things Alexis Hall has written. It's fun because it's all written from the perspective of a narrator who is Puck from A Midsummer Night's Dream by Shakespeare. And so it's this kind of stylized Victorian sapphic fantasy romance that is drawing on A Midsummer Night's Dream, and I loved it as a Shakespeare nerd. I thought it was great, but I do understand why this didn't work for everyone.
Yes. Also, I love Alexis Hall's writing, so I'm very excited for this. Question 4. What is your most anticipated release for the second half of the year? Okay, so there's always a lot of books I'm excited about, but I picked out 3 to talk about. The first one, I enjoy books from this author, but I'm just so curious how her first adult release in a different world is gonna go, and I'm even more intrigued. Okay, let me explain. So Swordcatcher by Cassandra Clare is coming out this fall, right? And it's the first book that she's written for adults that is not in the Shadowhunter world at all. She's been talking about this book for years, right? Like, I was at an event years ago where she mentioned how this was coming, and it kept getting pushed back and back and back, and I've been curious about it for years. So it finally is coming out, and it was blurbed by George R.R. Martin, and they're doing an event together, which is like
that kind of blew my
not
mind.
the pairing I would expect,
No.
right? I just, this is one that I'm just really curious about. So let me read you, because I saved this on Instagram. I was like, what? This is what George R.R. Martin had to say about Swordcatcher. Swordcatcher gave me everything I look for in fantasy: mystery and magic, not too much, not too little, expert world building, swordplay and politics, a colorful cast of interesting characters, and a story that kept me reading from the first page to the last with enough twists and turns to keep me turning the pages. It's a big, thick book, but it left me wanting more. When's the next one coming out?
That definitely had hooked my interest. I've liked other things from Cassandra Clare, but I wasn't sure what to expect from an adult novel from her. I have read it. I made a whole video about it. I will link it up above, like a spoilery discussion video of it. And I thought it was very good. I was really impressed. And after having read it, I can see why they paired her with George R.R. Martin for this tour, because they were both writing adult political fantasy. So yeah, while Swordcatcher's characters, at least in book 1, are a little bit younger, there's a little bit more focus on relationships. Like, there's a reason that they put them together, and I read this and I did really like it.
Another one that I'm really excited about is The Reformatory by Tananarive Due. Apparently this is the first full-length novel that she's written in a while, and
I have read this. It was excellent.
the premise of this sounds like it's going to be really good. It is one that I have pre-ordered. It says it's a gripping page-turning novel set in Jim Crow, Florida, following Robert Stevens Jr. as he's sent to a segregated reform school that is a chamber of terrors where he sees the horrors of racism and injustice for the living and the dead. So it's a horror novel at a reform school.
Yeah, it is intense, but it is so well written. Her books are incredible. I read it. I loved it. It was great.
Lastly is The Ruined by Renee Audier. This is the 4th and final book in the Beautiful series, which I've really been loving. This was supposed to come out last year and got delayed. So it's finally supposed to be coming out this December. And I am very excited to finally read the conclusion to the series and see what happens.
So I have read this and it was disappointing, and I'm so sad every time I have to say that, because I loved the rest of the books in the series. It was an okay book, but as a series ender, it was a bit of a letdown, and I think it made my most disappointing list of books for the year. So I have read it, but it was a bit of a disappointment. I have to say, I am really impressed that I somehow managed to read or attempt every single book that I said I was anticipating for that many years. I wasn't expecting that, because it's not like I keep track of them. I do think that I make a point of picking books that I am genuinely really excited to get to and have plans to get to relatively soon. And apparently that has paid off. So I don't have anything coming out of this that I have to do other than read the books that I said I was going to read for 2024. Hopefully this was interesting, a little look back down memory lane across so many years of me being on YouTube and how things have changed over the years. I hope you all enjoyed this. Talk to me in the comments down below. Let me know any of your thoughts, and let me know, what was the first one of these videos that you saw from me? At what point in this journey did you start watching my content? Because that first year I had a little baby channel, and things have grown and changed so much. I feel like the pandemic changed so many things and changed the landscape of the book internet quite a lot as well. So it's interesting to go back and see how things have evolved. Talk to me in the comments down below. If you like this video, it always helps if you give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you want to see more. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.